My name is Chanel Kitt, and it's such a pleasure to be
No,
here.
no, 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 no. Wait till the 30 seconds. Wait till the 30
Oh,
seconds.
okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chanel Kitt, and it's a pleasure to be here today to share some thoughts with you about art and mental health. I'm looking forward to sharing this virtual space with you all, and I thank everyone at blackdoctor.org as well as Howard University for having me. Please, next slide. Yes. So a bit about my background. As I said, my name is Chanel. I'm from the Bronx, New York. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York. I received my Bachelor of Science degree from Buffalo State College, where I focused on sociology and psychology. I attended Howard University School of Social Work from 2014 to 2016, where I earned my Master of Social Work degree. My focus was in direct practice and mental health settings. And also in 2014, I started painting. So I'll talk a bit more about how I was able to merge art and social work practice. I also attended Howard University for a Master in Fine Arts and Painting. And further, I was able to connect social work and art. So when we think about art and mental health, there's a lot that comes into play. What I learned earlier on was art was a way for me to express myself in a healthy manner. If I felt frustrated, if I felt angry, I was able to express those emotions onto canvas. In this presentation, I have some examples of artworks, not only that I created, but my clients have created. While I was in a social work school, I did a multitude of internships. One was with the District of Columbia Public School Head Start program. And while I was there, I worked with a supervisor and another social worker, and I spoke with them about my interests in art and social work. And I also shared my desire to connect the two with my professors at the School of Social Work. With lots of encouragement, I developed a self expression through art workshop, and I tested it out for the first time during my internship with Head Start with the parents of the children that I worked with. And what I learned was, they were able to express a lot of their stressors through art. And it was a healthy way for them to get some of those emotions out. So surveying them and understanding more about how they were able to, relieve some of those stressors, I thought, hey, this is something great here. So I did some research, and this was in 2014, 2015. So I've been doing a lot of research ever since then about how folks can utilize art as a tool of healing and self expression and to maintain and manage their mental health. So, here on this slide, it reads research demonstrates that creative arts and healthcare interventions can contribute to the following positive outcomes when services are integrated into medical treatment and community prevention and wellness programs. So, along with the research and what I noticed in my workshop was there is a reduced report of anxiety. Folks, they feel really anxious. They may shake or tap their foot or squeeze really tight. They may try to find something to do with their hands. What folks were expressing to me was it felt good to hold a paintbrush or to hold a pencil. It was calming to them. It was relaxing for them. So even the motion of painting added to some of that anxiety relief. Also, when we think about increase in self esteem and reduction in stress, folks felt, that they completed something that a lot of people I worked with, they didn't have, anything to hang on their wall to say, like, I earned that or I did this. But the workshop was able to provide a space for them to not only create something, but to have an outcome, an end result of a work that they created. So further, it states reduced levels of depression and improvements in quality of life. Next slide, please. Okay. So a bit about what I do now. I work as a senior clinician at Henry Street Settlement. It's a organization based in the Lower East Side of New York, and this organization, it supports my vision of connecting art and social work. While I don't do art with all of my clients, they have provided me with the space and opportunity to offer the self-expression through art workshop with our Connect community. So it's been a pleasure to continue this work and to continue receiving feedback from clients who say, hey, this is something that feels good for me. This is something that is motivating for me. This is something that I look forward to. To think about what's here in front of us, it states art cultivates deep empathy, teaches people to solve problems, and strengthens communities across cultures. So when I think about the dynamics of my art groups since the beginning 2014 to present day 2023, there's been many different ages in the groups, many different diagnoses, presentations, identities. So when they're able to come together to be in a safe space to express their thoughts and their feelings, oftentimes, the traumatic experiences that they've gone through, it feels good for them to receive feedback from people who may not look like them or may look like them or may have had a similar experience. So having a range of feedback and feeling affirmed in the space is also another nice addition to, expressing self through art in a mental health setting. Lessons learned from the arts can be applied to social work. Both making art and viewing the art of others have healing potential. They allow individuals and communities to explore feelings and ideas, cope with pain, expand self awareness, and bolster self esteem, much like we discussed in the previous slide. Art is an amazing communication tool, and it gives people the chance to uncover emotions and conflicts affecting their lives so they can address them. What I notice, and you'll see a bit later in the slides, is when we are expressing ourselves through a creative means, we can think about what we want to create, or sometimes we may just put paint on the canvas and start going, and then you see the end result. So there's a painting behind me, and I also have an image of it here that you'll see in a moment. And I'll talk more about my process in particular, but when we think about art and mental health, it's a safe space for people to express their deepest thoughts and feelings. Next slide, please. Okay. When we think about various forms of art to consider, for myself, I'm a visual artist. I paint. I primarily create abstract paintings or non-figurative paintings. But there are other folks, when we think about art, you would say dance or music or writing. So think about, what art means to you, and, are you an artist, or would you try this for yourself? Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an image of the painting that's right behind me, and this painting I utilized acrylic paint and oil paint over a 3-year period. So this was a period of transformation for myself, learning more about myself, doing a deep dive into myself. What is my core? Who am I? What is my base? So that's another part of art and mental health, where we're thinking about self in a way, in a visual way. So for this painting, I not only was thinking about myself and assessing, those core aspects of me, but thinking about the traumas I've gone through. How do I process those traumas? So a symbol that I utilize in my art is the circle. And when I think about the circle, I think about process, completion, full circle, 360, cycle. So I was thinking about a process. Sorry if you hear noise in my background. I have a puppy. He's running around. But when I think about my process of grief, processing grief, for example, the movement of the emotion is what I wanted to capture in this painting. So oftentimes when I speak to my clients about self-expression through art, we talk about the technical side of art, the elements and the principles of art. So we're thinking about line and movement and balance and shape and form, contrast. How do we combine all of this, the technical side of art, with the emotions of what you're feeling? Next slide, please. Thank you. When we look at this next image here, this is an image of a vernacular memorial. If you've seen this or if you've participated in the creation of one, you would know that it can be emotional to build this. Oftentimes, when we see these types of vernacular memorials, vernacular memorials, they represent someone who has passed away. So some of the signifiers of the memorial would be the candle, a balloon. Sometimes you may see a teddy bear, a T-shirt, or a balloon. Um, I wanted to include this part of my practice into this discussion of art and mental health because when we think about managing grief and loss, for example, the emotions connected to loss of a loved one, oftentimes the way that we find healing or closure is to create these vernacular memorials, not only alone, but with our community, our friends, and our families. Next slide, please. Thank you. So take a moment, to think about what comes to mind when you see a memorial. Have you, driven down a highway and saw one? Have you created one? Have you walked to the store and noticed one on the corner? So as I mentioned before, some of the commonly used items are flowers, teddy bears, personal items such as pictures or clothing items, sneakers, candles, liquor bottles, and balloons. Um, when we think about art and memorials, you see different colors and textures and movements and kind of like the elements and the principles I mentioned earlier. You see that come to life and manifested in these vernacular memorials. Next slide, please. Thank you. So connecting the vernacular memorial to social work. Um, for social work core values, we think of service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, integrity and competence. A few of these that I wanted to highlight, I wanted to start with social justice. Oftentimes when we hear of violent killings in society, particularly in the Black community, is shocking. It causes us to feel a lack of control. So oftentimes we notice that communities build these vernacular memorials to bring a voice to the person whose life was taken away, oftentimes without justice. We also create these memorials to build ourselves up as a community after a significant loss. So that also goes into the point of importance of human relationships. We feel connected to each other. We want the best for each other. We love each other. And when we lose someone, it's painful. So we are able to see how others love one another or care for one another through the ways that they commemorate them after they have passed on. In thinking about mental health, we think about the different layers or levels of grief. So we can think of acute grief or complicated grief, grief that lasts for many years. this is a way that people on the earlier end of losing someone is able to, in a healthy way, commemorate and process the loss. Next slide, please. Okay, this is another example of a vernacular memorial, and some of the symbols you see, there's a basketball there. You know, perhaps this person was on a team or they were passionate about basketball. There's a radio there. It could be playing this person's favorite song. You know, when we think about the image and how it relates to art, someone, it looks as if someone spray painted it or drew it on there, painted it there. So we're seeing the expression of grief, commemorating that loss, processing, you know, the journey of, you know, working through the complications of losing someone here. Next slide, please. Okay. This is another example. And I wanted to add in this example because there's a significant amount of teddy bears here. So it can lead you to think, you know, perhaps this was a child that passed on, or, you know, maybe it was someone who, you know, felt a deep connection to these items. Maybe they were heirlooms or, you know, something that meant something to them. So they wanted to put this onto this person's memorial to commemorate them. Next slide. Thank you. This memorial here is one that I created. My father, he passed away in 2014. And while I was at Howard, I was processing his loss. The the first, well, the 2 years that I was at the School of Social Work, I felt a lot of support from my professors and from the dean there, and I felt, you know, it made things easier for me to process his loss, but I still needed a healthy way to let out those emotions that I even still feel today. So when I went back to Howard for art, part of my thesis was this memorial. So I decided to develop this memorial in honor of my father, with the culture of vernacular memorials. And I wanted to utilize various liquor bottles. My dad, his favorite drink, he liked, you know, to have a cocktail here and there. So for his memorial, I wanted to keep in more of the liquor bottles to symbolize that, and also to, you know, nod to the vernacular essence of memorials that I saw growing up in New York City. So here, it was a community effort. A lot of the bottles were donated from local bars and restaurants near the Howard area. And I also added in candles and some flowers there. But in thinking of my own personal mental health and how art has been a healthy tool for me, as I mentioned a bit earlier, in moments where I felt frustrated or you know, managing my own grief, art was a healthy tool and a way for me to process that. And I wanted to provide that for clients that I worked with. Next slide, please. Okay. So thinking further about health and wellness, we're thinking about the emotional impact of the memorial or creating art, processing grief and what that feels and looks like, healing. What is the healing process? Do we heal? Do we get to that part, or do we accept, you know, what has happened? Or is healing a process that we're always engaged in, and we're working on getting to a place where we can be accepting of what has happened, um, and then getting to a place of closure, or, you know, do we get to that place of closure? So these are balances that I was working through for myself. Next slide. Okay. So over the years, from my time at the School of Social Work up until the present, I've been doing the self-expression through art workshops that I mentioned a bit earlier. And these are a few images that I added in of participants, different ages, different organizations, different, you know, purposes. So for one example, I did a self-expression through art workshop for breast cancer survivors. Another I did for children who were under 5. Another I did, and I changed the material. We didn't use painting, we used fabrics. So while the core of the group remained the same, the focuses may have shifted a bit depending on the client population. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'll talk a bit more about my self-expression through art group and how it connects to art and mental health. So for my group, and in particular, the one that I'm running now at Henry Street Settlement, I wanted participants to build their self-esteem, build their interpersonal relationship skills, also get out of the house. A lot of times I would talk to folks and they would express that they isolate a lot, or they felt too anxious to engage with other people. So it's creating an open space where people can, come in at a time that works best for them, or to be in a space where they know, hey, I can, have something to eat. I can have, some water, some juice, and decompose or decompress, what I'm feeling, or express what I'm feeling. I wanted to manifest that for them. So also, I wanted to increase their artistic skill set. So thinking about the elements and principles of art, as I mentioned a bit earlier. So honing in so that they can walk away not only with having a healthy alternate expressive tool, but having some core art technical skills. And we also met weekly. We ended for a last week for the season, and now we're preparing for exhibition. But we had weekly group discussions of different topics that I'll speak more to in a second. So, okay, hi, nice to meet you. I see that in the chat. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are some of the topics that we talked about in my current self-expression through art group, but also in previous ones. So I ask clients to, or participants, sometimes I don't use the word client. Sometimes I'll say individuals that I work with, or participants. Oftentimes I ask folks what they prefer to be referred as. So if you hear me say clients or participants or folks, I'm using it in an interchangeable way. So I encourage folks to think, who am I? What do I value? What are my strengths? What do I want to improve on? So having a base from which they're working up from, you'll see in a minute their artwork that were created based on these prompts or these topics. The next one that I wanted folks to think about was exploring their present feelings. So thinking about, how do you currently feel? Are you at peace? Are you angry? Are you, happy? Are you calm? So having people think about the way that they're feeling and expressing that visually has proven to be a healthy way for them to express themselves. So thinking about also self-care practices, self-advocacy, forgiving self, identifying stressors and exploring healthy coping mechanisms, setting boundaries. Boundary setting was a favorite topic amongst the clients. A lot of times when we were talking, I noticed that clients felt people crossed their boundaries. So we spent a couple weeks discussing boundaries and creating artworks about what boundary setting looks like. Working through conflicts, and then also goal setting and future oriented thinking. Next slide. Thank you. All right. So at this moment, we're going into a series of slides of client artworks, and I have been given permission to share their works. They are excited and proud about the artworks that they've created, and they put in a lot of work. So in the self-expression through art group, All of the materials are provided to the clients. They don't have to spend any money, which adds to mental health relief. They don't have to worry about this being another expense for them. So for this painting here, this was created by a client. Um, she wanted to create cherry blossoms, and it reminded her of her childhood, seeing cherry blossoms with her family. So connecting past memory to the current moment and expressing that outward. It was great to hear her thoughts about that. Next slide, please. Okay. These are two other paintings, both created by the same client, not the same client as the previous slide, but another client, and they created both of these paintings. So this was a technique that I showed them where we can throw paint onto the canvas, and the action of throwing, they felt good. It was a relief. They were able to decrease some anxiety. And we talk about different coping mechanisms and techniques that they can engage in to decrease their anxiety or depression or anger. So we talk about muscle relaxation techniques and neck rolling and and relaxing their shoulders and unclenching their jaws. So those physical methods to decrease stress was supported also by the action of throwing paint onto canvas. Sometimes folks would lay the canvas on the ground and take the paint and toss it in this motion, or they'll have it on a table easel and toss it outward. And these motions felt good for them, as they would say. So I took a note of that so I could add it into my research of art and mental health, and how art is a healthy tool for folks who are managing various emotional stressors. Next slide, please. All right. So these two paintings were created by another client, not the same two from before. So what we see here is this is someone who expressed that she had a lot that she was managing, and she wanted to utilize the course as a way to release. So a word that I was hearing a lot was release, release, release. So I wrote that word down too, and we talked about that. But this was a client where she focused in on her color palette. So we were thinking about color. What colors represent how you're feeling? So for her, she wanted to use cooler tones, but you see the splashes of warm colors there, such as the red and the yellow. But the primary colors were cooler, and that spoke to how she was feeling in that moment, per the topic of the week. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. This is another client, and similarly to the others, this was, an expression of throwing paint. Or if you look closely to the work that's on the left, you can see a circular motion there. So even moving your arm in a circular motion, I found could be healing or can add to relieving some anxiety and stress. So these types of exercises can come forth through creating artwork. Next slide, please. All right. So these are two paintings, both created by the same client. The work that you see on the left is a skull, right? And the work you see on the right is a web, or its connections. So I wanted to add in both of this client's works into the presentation because these were different weeks, different emotions, different feelings. The feeling on the left was anger. The feeling on the left was isolation, and this comes out when we think about self-expression through art. It may not always be colorful. It may not always be, a topic of, hope. This is a work here where it's very much feeling hopeless and upset. So we talked about this, and I enjoy the workshop and the space because we can have conversations that are not sugar coated. We're going right to the core of how you're feeling. What is your mental health state now? So I do, at times take folks to the side and we have one-on-one conversations about what they're going through, what they're feeling. The work on the right, this was a few weeks later, and he shared that this represents making connections. So going from a place of feeling completely isolated from other humans to a place of wanting to be connected, feeling connected, even within the group. This was a big deal for him and for me to see. And for the other group participants. And along the way, what I noticed was people encourage one another and they uplift one another. So when we think about art and mental health, there's a space that is created where people are utilizing art as a comfort. It's a comfort in a springboard to have conversations about their mental health with other people where they may not have otherwise. I don't have an image of this work with me, but I had another participant who recently lost her father, and she created herself crying, and she was talking about, I miss my dad, and we went into a conversation about grief and loss and how to process that. And also, in this space, we provide one another with resources. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a client who um, is on a sobriety journey, and this she wanted to focus on the green. So when we think about color theory, color meanings, for her, green was refresh, renew, abundance. So that is her primary color here. She added in a bit of red. The red represents the struggle that she went through to get to the place where that central figure is her. And she said, that looks like an angel, that looks like me. So that central figure who, if you look at it, people interpret art in different ways, right? But when we discussed it, I saw her with her arms upward, reaching for that yellow, reaching for the sun, reaching upward with, turning away from the struggle. So we have these types of in-depth conversations, about the artwork. So while we can think about, let's say you're not in an art group, right? Let's say you're creating art on your own and you went through something and you want to process it. You can do that too. You can interpret your own artwork. You can do this on your own if you want it, or if you are finding that it's difficult to talk about an experience and you paint something or write a song or create a dance and you can utilize that in a therapeutic setting, you can also do that too. So it gives you another way to communicate how you're feeling. And that was important for me to realize on my own because I was going through some things and it was hard for me to express that. But I use art in a way, I use art as a tool. And then I use that to jump forth other conversations about how I was feeling. It helped to give me the words to speak on some of those traumas. Next slide, please. All right. This was another client. We had a week where we talked about self-esteem, self-confidence, who am I, identity. And this client, she was unsure. So you can see some of those question marks, and there's a few that are backwards. Question marks is who am I? So processing that and doing that through the artwork. And as you can see, there's a lot of colors. So although this person is questioning and wondering like who am I, you can see that personality coming through the color choice. And even the technique, the pointillism, the dotting there, that's a tension relief right there. So there's I don't have a paintbrush near me. It's But if you're putting dots onto a canvas board, that up and down, up, down, that gives you a moment of pause and to focus in on what you're doing, and it can distract you from some of those stressors. So that's another thing I realized. Clients would say, this helps me to, take a moment away from my problems, or I can't wait to paint, or I'm looking forward to this because I need my art, or it turned into something where people felt connected to it and it was personal for them, and it helped them to work through heavy feelings. Next slide, please. All right. There was one week. Sometimes I'll go off topic from what's on the list because of what comes up in the class. So being present is essential while working with clients, because you may have an agenda of everything that's going to happen, but then someone may say something and you have to change the whole course. So for this group, for this class, we were focusing on home because that came up in a previous session, and I wanted to dig deeper into what does home look like for you? What does home feel like for you? Oftentimes, I work with clients who identify as houseless individuals or undomiciled individuals, and home is something that is internal for them, or home is something they never had. So for this exercise, we talked about what does home look like? What does it feel like? What could it be? But then also the mental health aspect of, being stable inside of a home, and then also listening to stories of people who felt unstable when they didn't have a home. So for this client, you can see that the dry brush technique was happening here for the house, and you can see it's like a vague shaped house. But next to the house is a tree, and it's an abundant tree. I spoke to them. It looks like there's like a butterfly or birds in the tree. So home for them, it meant this. This is what home looked like for them. This is the home that they wanted, the home that they dreamed of. In the past, just thinking about this, I've had clients who they 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 didn't know how to even begin a conversation. It was tough to start a conversation. And the artwork, I was able to say, oh, I can see that you love fishing from what you created here. And then the first conversation would be about you're fishing, and then, oh, you fish with your dad. Okay. Oh, dad passed away. Oh, how are you managing? So you can build off of one image into a deeper conversation about a family history or their own personal history. Next slide, please. Okay. So also, when I think about art, mental health, different modes of art and different ways to express ourselves, we use canvas, so stretch canvas on wood on a border, or sometimes we'll use unstretched canvas. So these are examples of artworks clients created using unstretched canvas. And what I love about this was the unstretched canvas, you can put it into your hands and squeeze it. You can squeeze it with your hands. You can pull it, and it may not rip, or it may rip. So if you look closely, you may see some strings there. That feeling of ripping, that goes into the release, that word release that I was noticing a lot of clients use. So ripping the stretched canvas, stretching it, the unstretched canvas, stretching it even though it's unstretched, like kind of manipulating the cloth in a way where you feel control of the material. So these are examples of clients who felt the control of the material. And we didn't start the group using unstretched canvas. I waited a little bit until folks felt more comfortable using the paints. We use acrylic, watercolor. So here, this is a blend of acrylic and watercolor. So once they felt comfortable using the material, then I introduced the unstretched canvas, and the beautiful results are before you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, yes. So, thank you so much. This was my presentation. I wanted to, start a bit from, how I got into art and social work. Show you some of the artworks that my clients created, and talk about, what they express as, the benefits of art, and healing through art, healing through this tool, using an alternate method of self-expression, managing their mental health in a way that they hadn't thought of otherwise. And also, I wanted to talk just a bit about, how or what it meant to me to utilize art in a way that felt good and safe for me. So thank you so much, and I'll be happy to take any questions or to hear any feedback. I want to thank again, blackdoctor.org for having me, and also the Howard University School of Social Work for having me, and for this honor of being in the space with you all. Thank you.